HOA Karen fined me $100 for a small dish. I cited FCC law and installed a giant legal tower. The first time Carol slapped that bright orange violation notice on my front door, I actually thought it was a joke. $100, it said in bold underlined letters, for unauthorized satellite dish installation. Immediate removal required. Further penalties may apply. I look in the paper to the so-called offending structure in my backyard. A little gray dish, barely bigger than a dinner plate, tucked neatly on a pole behind the oak tree. My grandkids had left a soccer ball out there that was literally larger than the dish. Carol wasn't joking. She stood at the curb in her HOA golf cart, clipboard in one hand, phone recording in the other, like she was documenting a crime scene. "You were told this community values aesthetics, Mr. Miller," she called out, loud enough for half the street to hear. "That thing is ugly, and frankly, it's a health risk. Radiation." I'd been yelled at by officers, politicians, and one angry general in a sandstorm. Carol didn't even crack the top 10. I walked over, slow, calm. "Carol, it's a small satellite dish for TV, for my grandkids. Can you show me where the rules say I can't have it?" She smirked. "You don't need to see the clause. I'm the clause. Pay the fine, remove the dish, or we escalate. Lean on the house if we have to. Those are the rules." Behind my screen door, I saw my wife July watching, arms folded, that tiny smile she gets when someone thinks they're in charge. Carol had no idea who she just threatened or how many rules I'd spent a lifetime learning to read. I took the notice from her, folded it once, and said, "All right, if that's how we're doing it, I'll follow your rules. Every single one of them. And if you want to see how a $100 fine turned into a giant, perfectly legal tower she couldn't touch, stick around and hit subscribe so you don't miss what came next, because the HOA had no idea I was already 3 steps ahead. I didn't buy that house in Houston to fight with a clipboard on wheels. July and I moved there 5 years before Dishgate. After 32 years as an Army engineer, I wanted grass, oak trees, and a porch where my knees could ache in peace. We chose a neighborhood on purpose. Big lots, brick houses, flags on porches, kids on bikes, barbecue on Saturdays. The kind of place where you keep your lawn neat and nobody bothers you. So I kept my end. The yard was edge sharp. My old 95 Silverado sat in the driveway like a museum piece. The flag went up at sunrise and came down at dusk. No excuses. Inside, July made a nest. Flowers, soft colors, grandkid photos everywhere. The kids started calling it Camp Pops. I pretended to complain, but that name did more for me than any medicine. Then the grandkids brought the chaos. 4 under 10 can turn a quiet street into a runway. They ran circles around the oak, dragged toys across my driveway, fought over my recliner like it was a throne. July just laughed. "Bill, this is what we bought the house for." The first trouble wasn't a dish. It was Carol's garden gnomes. One hot afternoon, I was in the garage organizing drill bits when the front yard went quiet, the guilty kind. I stepped out and saw Tyler frozen mid-stride, clutching one of Carol's ceramic gnomes like a live grenade. "Tyler," I said low, "turn around." Carol was already marching over, clipboard in one hand, phone up in the other, recording like she'd caught a cartel. "What kind of example are you setting, Mr. Miller? Your grandchildren are vandals. This is destruction of property." I took the gnome, checked it, no cracks, just dirt, and handed it back. "They're kids. It won't happen again." Then I sent the grandkids inside and gave them the talk. Respect property, apologize, don't cross lines. They apologized on my front walk, eyes on their shoes. For a minute, I thought that was the end. 2 days later, a white HOA envelope showed up. Notice of behavioral concern. Lots of words about unruly minors, liability, and community standards, with my name in bold as a responsible party. No fine, just a warning. A shot across the bow. I read it at the kitchen table while July arranged sunflowers. I shrugged. Kid screwed up. I handled it. Not worth a war. July watched me over her glasses. "You sure?" I filed the letter in a yellow folder and tried to forget it, but the seed was planted. The next weekend, I wanted the grandkids inside, out of Carol's line of fire. My son mentioned a satellite service with every cartoon channel imaginable. So I planned it like any project. Measure the yard, check the sky, picked a spot behind the oak, mounted a small dish clean and discreet. Out of sight, cables neat, peace preserved. And for a while it worked. The kids stayed on the couch, the noise stayed inside our walls, and July and I sat on the porch at night, feeling like we'd finally cracked the code. Until Carol stopped talking about gnomes and started talking about radiation, and her first gentle reminder began to sound a lot closer to a threat. The funny thing is, the first official dish incident didn't start with the orange notice. It started with a shadow in my driveway. Tuesday afternoon, hot enough the concrete was sweating. Garage door open, country radio low, me sorting screws into label bins like a retired engineer who can't sit still. My Silverado sat shining in the driveway. Through the open door, I could see the kids inside, glued to cartoons loud enough to rattle the walls. That little gray dish behind the oak had been up a couple weeks. Mounted solid. Cables and conduit, grounding done by the book. If the Army ever inspects backyards, mine passes. I heard the whine of an electric motor before I saw her. Carol's HOA golf cart rolled past, slowed, then reversed with that obnoxious beeping. She parked at the curb and stared, clipboard in her lap, phone in her hand, scanning my place like she was hunting a violation. "Afternoon, Carol," I said. She didn't answer, just squinted past me. Then she spotted the dish between the branches and actually gasped. "There it is." She hopped off the cart like a TV detective and cut across my lawn toward the side gate. "Carol," I said, still calm, "you're on my grass. This is an inspection, Mr. Miller. I have authority," she snapped. I stepped in front of the gate and rested a hand on it. "Not without my permission, you don't." She lifted her phone so the camera caught my face. "Refusing access," she narrated. "Noted." I looked right into the lens. "You can see everything you're allowed to see from the sidewalk." She backed up to the curb and started zooming in, clicking photos like a machine. "Unauthorized satellite equipment," she said. "Violates aesthetic standards. Possible health hazard. Those things emit radiation." I almost laughed. "It's a receiver, not a microwave. It's for the grandkids. And it's behind the tree. You had to hunt for it." "The rules are clear," she said, tapping her clipboard. "No dishes visible from common areas. Period." "Show me that rule." She hugged the clipboard to her chest. "The board empowered me to interpret the guidelines. I don't need to show you every clause I enforce." That's when July appeared in the doorway, dish towel over her shoulder, wearing that polite little smile. "Everything all right, honey?" "Carol's doing an inspection," I said. "She doesn't like the kid TV." Carol angled her phone to frame both of us. "This is about property values and safety," she announced, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. Right on cue, Mrs. Jenkins walked by with her beagle and stared at the dish she could barely see. Carol raised her voice another notch. "We've had complaints. Eyesores. Unapproved equipment. People thinking rules don't apply to them." I felt my neck warm, not from shame, from being made into a show. I'd spent decades keeping other people's chaos off the radar. I didn't like being anyone's footage. "So you've documented it," I said. "What happens now?" Carol smiled slow. "You'll receive a notice. Failure to comply means fines. Continued refusal," she paused, "can lead to a lien and legal action. We've done it before." She wanted me to argue, to blow up, to give her a clip. Instead, I nodded once. "All right." Her smile twitched, like cooperation wasn't in her script. She climbed back into the cart, did a sloppy turn that tore a strip of grass off my curb, and buzzed away. July joined me at the driveway. "She's going to send you something stupid," she said. "Probably. You going to ignore it?" I shook my head. "No, I'm going to read it. Then we'll see." She slipped her hand into my elbow. "You can just take it down." I looked at that little dish hiding in the branches, and at the kids inside, safe and loud in our living room. "I put that up to keep them out of trouble," I said. "I'm not sure teaching them to roll over at the first loud voice is the lesson I want to give." July's smile sharpened. Then I'll make coffee. You're going to need your reading glasses. Thing is, I still thought it was just one overzealous neighbor with a clipboard. Annoying but manageable. I didn't know that white envelope was only the opening shot, and that this wasn't about aesthetics or safety at all. It was a test. And Carol was just getting started. The violation notice showed up 2 days after that driveway showdown, right on schedule. July brought in the mail and slid a thick white envelope across the kitchen table, like it might bite. HOA logo in the corner. My name typed dead center, the kind of paper that makes most people's stomach drop. I poured coffee first. Priorities. 3 pages. Page 1. Notice of violation. Unauthorized satellite dish. Page 2. Carol's sidewalk photos with big red circles around my little gray dish like it was an enemy bunker. Page 3 was a real threat. Fine. $100. Remedy within 10 days or face additional daily fines and lien proceedings. July read over my shoulder, lips tight. She really wrote health hazard. Radiation. Property values. She tapped a line. Visible from common area. There it is. I breathed slow. Lien proceedings wasn't theoretical to me. I'd seen people lose houses over paperwork they didn't understand. What are you thinking? She asked. I'm thinking. I said, this belongs in the garage. The garage is where my brain lives. Tools on pegboards, drawers labeled, chaos not allowed to stay. I cleared a spot on the workbench, pulled a fresh yellow folder, and wrote on the tab in block letters, HOA Carol. The gnome letter went in first. Then this. 2 sheets. Barely a skirmish. But the social war started immediately. Next morning, porch coffee didn't taste the same. Curtains moved faster. Conversations died quicker. Mr. Jenkins avoided my eyes like his trash and was suddenly fascinating. Carol's golf cart did slow patrols past my house, just long enough to make the point. I was now the guy with the dish. Friday, I washed my 95 Silverado like always. Hose running, classic rock low. Across the street, Carol was talking to a couple from the cul-de-sac, and she pointed right at my house like a flare. We have rules for a reason, she said, loud enough to reach my driveway. Once you let one person clutter up the skyline, next thing you know we're a trailer park. And the radiation, I read an article. Kids get headaches, nosebleeds. The woman looked uneasy. But isn't it just TV? Carol gave a tight laugh. That's what they all say. Just TV. Just a flag. People like that always have a just. I kept my back turned and buff chrome that didn't need buffing. In the Army, we called it non-kinetic pressure. Nobody hits you. They just make sure everyone thinks you're the problem. Later, July came home from the mailbox with her jaw set. She cornered me. She said, asked, sweet as syrup, if constant signal exposure was safe for the children. Said she'd hate for our grandkids to suffer because you're stubborn about decor. In front of the boys. Something cold settled in my chest. Coming at me was one thing. Using my grandkids as props was another. What did you say? I asked. July's eyes flashed. I smiled and told her you installed more antennas in more hostile environments than she's had hot dinners, and the only health risk is unnecessary stress. I laughed once. Short, sharp. Then that evening Tyler looked up at me over a pile of Legos. Is the TV making us sick, Pops? I knelt to his level. Bud, the only thing that TV is hurting is your bedtime. You're fine. He nodded, but Carol had planted the seed. Over the week, little things piled up. Neighbors who used the chat now gave tight nods. 2 houses down, a brand new dish sat bold on a roof, visible from the main road, but belonged to a board member. No notice there. Then the group email hit. Subject: maintaining our community's beauty and safety. Generic HOA address, but the language was pure Carol. Dramatic warnings about unsightly additions and neighbors who feel they are above the covenants. No names, but the timing was obvious. Attachments were vague guidelines with no real standards. July read it and whistled. She's campaigning. I read it twice, noting dates, phrasing, and what they didn't say. Then I slid my reading glasses up and leaned back on the garage stool. Every tool around me was in its place. "What are you going to do?" July asked. "I'm going to do what I always do," I said. "Document. Observe. Let them talk." Because Carol never understood this. Every whisper, every mass email, every incident report wasn't just pressure. It was evidence. And I was filing it, one neat sheet at a time, into that yellow folder with her name on it. The neighbors thought I was just an old guy getting squeezed by the HOA machine. What they didn't see was the war had already shifted from feelings to facts, and every social jab was lining up into a pattern I knew how to use. And when they stopped pretending it was neighborly concern and started playing with real money and real threats, I made my decision. If they wanted to play by the book, I'd show them exactly how the book worked. The money part hit on a Wednesday. I was in the garage, going over an old deployment photo album of my oldest grandson, when July called out, "Bill, you're going to want to see this one." Her voice had that tight edge I'd only heard a few times before, once in a hospital waiting room, once when a bank misplaced a payment overseas. I wiped my hands, set the album down, and walked into the kitchen. Another HOA envelope sat on the table. Thicker, certified mail green card stapled to corner like a medal of irritation. I opened it and felt my jaw tighten, not from surprise, just from the precision of it. Notice of escalating fines. It said across the top. My $100 initial violation was now joined by a schedule. $25 per day until unauthorized equipment was removed. If the balance remained unpaid after 30 days, the association reserves the right to initiate lien proceedings, including but not limited to attorney's fees and court costs. They'd even itemize a projected total. Estimated liability after 60 days, $1,600 plus. I set the letter down, flat. July slid a second page in front of me, the one she'd already read, a bolded paragraph. Failure to resolve this matter may result in suspension of community privileges, including but not limited to pool access and event participation. I actually snorted. They're threatening to take away the bounce house at the 4th of July picnic. July didn't smile. "They're threatening our home, Bill. Carol got the board to sign this. Look." She pointed to the bottom. 3 scrawled signatures from people I waved to at the mailbox. Before I could respond, I heard the faint beep-beep outside. I stepped to the window. Carol's golf cart idled at the curb, angled just so she could see our front door. She pretended to be scrolling on her phone, but every few seconds her eyes flicked up, waiting, hunting for a reaction. July followed my gaze. She timed the delivery. She wanted to see if she broke you. I'd seen this before on a different scale. You squeeze someone's wallet and their reputation at the same time, most people fold. They sell the truck, take down the dish, apologize for things that aren't wrong just to make the heat go away. Tyler wandered in, holding a plastic dinosaur. "Pops, can we watch the space show again?" I looked at him, then at the little gray dish out back, then at the red numbers on the HOA letter. 100, 25, 1600. "Yeah, bud," I said. "You can watch your show." July waited until he was gone, then leaned on the counter, arms crossed. "We can pay it," she said quietly. "We've got the money, but if we pay, we're admitting they're right." I shook my head once. "They're not right." I tapped the phrase lien proceedings. This is the move. This is where folks get scared and cave. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from my neighbor Mark, 3 houses down. "Hey man, heard Carol's making trouble about your TV thing. Careful, she did that lien stuff a guy on Oak Ridge last year. He ended up selling." Selling. I looked back at our flag flapping steady on its pole. The truck in the driveway. The oak tree shading the little contraption that started all this. I'd moved too many times in uniform. I wasn't about to be bullied out of the first place I'd chosen on my own. I picked up the HOA packet, walked it out to the garage, and laid it open on the workbench next to the folder labeled HOA Carol. 2 letters became 4. Violation. Group email printout. Fine schedule. Threat of lien. I added a sticky note to the top. Escalation. Money plus property. Date. Time. Initials. Old habit. July came to the doorway, drying her hands on a towel. "So what now, Sergeant?" I looked around at the walls. Tools lined up like soldiers on inspection. Drawers labeled, extension cords coiled perfect. There's a moment right before a mission when you stop reacting and start deciding. They're not just trying to fix a problem dish anymore. I said, they're testing how much pressure it takes to make me blink. And if they do it to me, retired, no mortgage, organized, what are they doing to the young couple down the street with a baby and 2 car payments? July's eyes softened. "Then we don't blink." I nodded slowly. "No, we don't. But we also don't swing wild. They want me emotional, loud, easy to paint as a crazy old vet with the ugly antenna." I tapped the folder. "We stay boring. Paper, procedure, deadlines." She smiled then, the real smile. "You know, there's something you haven't asked me yet." "What's that?" "Whether the law is actually on their side." I raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" She tilted her head, considering. "Not the law that matters." Outside, Carol finally lost interest and rolled her cart down the street, probably to measure a mailbox. I watched her go and felt that cold, clear feeling slide into place. The one I used to get staring at a mission map. "All right," I said, more to myself than anyone. "They've shown me how far they're willing to go. Money, reputation, threats. They're not going to stop on their own. And if I let this stand, they'll roll right over the next guy." I slid the folder shut with a soft thump. That was the day I understood this wasn't just about my backyard dish. This was about how they ran the whole neighborhood. And if I didn't push back now, they'd just keep tightening the screws on every easy target they could find. I turned to July. "No more reacting. We're going to make a plan." Because once they came for my home with escalating fines and lean threats, this stopped being a nuisance and became a campaign. And if there's one thing I know how to do, it's win a campaign with paperwork and patience. And that's exactly when I stopped playing defense and started looking for the rule that would flip this whole thing back on them. My friend, tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Do you think I acted the right way? Before I could do that, though, I needed to know exactly which higher power outranked Carol's clipboard. And it turned out we had that higher power sitting at my own kitchen table. That night, after the kids finally crashed in a tangle of blankets and popcorn crumbs, July and I sat at the kitchen table with the HOA packet between us like a dead animal. She nudged it. "You know this isn't really about that little dish, right?" "I know," I said. "It's about seeing what they can get away with." July studied me, then reached into her purse and set a slim black notebook on the table, one I hadn't seen in a long time. "Bill," she said, soft but steady, "you remember what I did before the flower shop?" "Sure. That firm downtown. Contracts and such." She smiled. "Telecom consumer rights. HOA overreach. FCC regs. I was an attorney, not just a paralegal. I just didn't bring the job home much. We'd been married 44 years. I knew she was sharp. I didn't realize she still carried that kind of blade. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "the woman who arranges tulips by color code knows federal communications law." She flipped the notebook open. Tidy handwriting, case notes, references. "I'm telling you the HOA picked the wrong hill to die on." Something in my chest unclenched. Like realizing you're not walking into the dark alone. She slid the violation letter closer. "They keep saying unauthorized satellite dish like it's magic, but they never quote the covenant. And they're pretending the FCC doesn't exist." "FCC," I repeated. "And ODRD." She wrote it on a sticky note in block letters and slapped it on the folder. "Odored. Never heard of it." I admitted. She grinned. "Over-the-air reception devices rule. Federal regulation. Short version? HOAs can't flat out prohibit certain small dishes and antennas on property. You exclusively control if it's for receiving TV or internet. They can fuss about safety and true common areas, but aesthetics and radiation vibes don't beat federal law." I stared out at the backyard. "So this fine," I tapped the schedule, "is built on sand." "Quicksand," she said. She brewed coffee like it was pre-mission fuel. "Then follow me into the garage, my HQ. I cleared a bigger space on the workbench and laid the HOA papers out in order while she opened her laptop. Step 1, she said, slipping into courtroom calm. We confirm what your dish is and where it sits. Diameter, purpose, placement. If it fits odored, they're dead in the water. Easy, I said. 18 inches. Receives TV. Mounted on a pole on our side of the fence. Behind the oak. Exclusive use. Good, she said. Step 2. We pull the actual covenants and guidelines. Latest revision. We highlight every clause they might lean on. I grabbed the binder I'd filed when we moved in and never really read. Already have them, I said. You married a lawyer and never thought you'd need HOA covenants, she teased. For the next hour, we moved like a team. I measured the dish like an engineering report. July cross-reference covenant language against odored pages from the FCC site. I took fresh photos from the sidewalk and street corner, date stamped, labeled. On the bench, chaos became a map. HOA docs clamped on the left, FCC/odor printouts underlined on the right, violation letters in the middle. July tapped a paragraph. Any restriction that impairs a viewer's ability to install, maintain, or use an eligible antenna is prohibited. Fines and forced removal fall right in that bucket. And eligible means? I asked. Dishes under 1 meter for TV reception, installed in areas under your exclusive control. She pointed outside. Check, check, check. I exhaled. So they're not just being jerks. They're crossing a federal line. Exactly, she said, eyes bright. Federal preemption means their little handbook doesn't overrule Washington. She pulled a legal pad and wrote a title like it was muscle memory. Response, Miller v. HOA dish. Step 3, she said. We respond once. Calm, precise. We cite their own documents, then odored. No emotion, no sidewalk arguments. Just facts and a deadline to rescind the violation and fines. And if they don't, I asked. Her smile went cold. Then we start copying the FCC and the state consumer folks. And if they really want to dance, I know a lawyer who sues HOA for sport. But we don't lead with threats. We give them a chance to choose the smart path. Watching her write, it hit me. My whole career was training for this. Field manuals, SOPs, codes. Reading what the rule actually says, not what someone wishes it said. Carol thought I was a grumpy retiree with a truck and a flag. She didn't know I spoke her language, rules, better than she did. July looked up. You don't need to out-yell her, she said. You just need to out-paper her. I set the yellow HOA Carol folder dead center on the bench and wrote one word under that odored sticky note. Strategy. In that moment, I stopped being the guy annoyed about a fine and became the guy building a case. I read her draft letter. Clean, respectful, deadly. Subject line. Alleged violation. Protected over-the-air reception device. From here on out, July said, you don't raise your voice. You let your letters talk. And every time Carol pushes, she walks deeper into federal footprints she can't even see. All right, I said, then we don't just comply. We comply so hard the law lands on our side of the scale. Knowing the law was only half the battle. Next came the quiet part, documenting every move, every email, every threat, turning my tidy garage into a war room of evidence they'd never see coming. From the outside, it probably looked like I'd back down. I didn't yell at Carol in the street. I didn't rip the dish out of the ground. I didn't storm into a board meeting with a pitchfork. I just went quiet. That's the thing about people like Carol. They mistake silence for surrender. In my world, silence meant the operation just went from loud to classified. Step 1 was time. July and I circled the 10-day deadline on the violation notice in red. Then we circled a date 5 days before that. Our response goes in here, she said, tapping the earlier circle. Certified mail. Signature required. We don't miss their deadline. We beat it. I pinned that notice on the corkboard above my workbench, right next to an old deployment photo. Every morning, when I went out to the garage to sip coffee and sort screws, I'd glance up and see the countdown. Step 2 was collection. I pulled every HOA email we'd gotten since moving in and dumped them into a folder on my laptop. July sat beside me, glasses low on her nose, flagging anything with words like antenna, dish, satellite, aesthetic standards, and her personal favorite, health concerns. Meanwhile, the neighborhood theater continued. Carol's cart made 2 passes a day now. She always slowed in front of our house, phone in hand, pretending to check a list. Sometimes she'd raise the camera and grab a slow pan of my roofline. I started waving. Nothing big. Just 2 fingers off my coffee mug. She hated that. I bought a little spiral notebook, the cheap kind you get in the back-to-school aisle, and left on a shelf by the garage door. Every time I heard that electric motor whine or saw her out front, I'd jot down the time, direction of travel, and any comments I overheard. July 14th, 1540. Carol parked in front of house 4 minutes. Filmed side yard. Spoke with Mrs. Jenkins. Heard radiation and kids. July saw the notebook one afternoon and raised an eyebrow. Logbook. After action journal. I said, if she ever claims this was routine patrol, I want to be able to show a pattern. She smiled. That's my husband. Weaponizing a 79-cent notebook. Inside, we set up the digital side of the war. I created a new email address just for HOA communications and forwarded every message there. July showed me how to download each one as a PDF with the full header info, timestamps, sender servers, everything. So if they later edited anything, we had the originals. Then came the recordings. One Saturday, while the kids were in the living room yelling at a cartoon villain, I heard that familiar beep-beep and Carol's voice drifting through the open window. We're doing everything we can, but some people just don't care about the community, she said to someone I couldn't see. He refuses to cooperate. Frankly, I'm worried about the children in that house. My jaw tightened. But instead of marching outside, I picked up my phone from the counter, opened the camera app, and hit record. I walked to the window, stay inside, and filmed through the glass. Not her face, just the cart, the sidewalk, the timestamp in the corner. July looked up from her book. Going full CIA on the HOA. If she ever claimed she never said a word about radiation or worry for children, I want more than my memory. We saved that clip in a folder labeled Verbal Pressure, Carol. In the evenings, the garage turned into our little command center. Flag fluttering outside, classic rock low on the radio, July with her laptop and me with a yellow pad. We went line by line through the covenants. Here, she said one night, highlighting a sentence in the design guidelines. They say, no satellite dishes or antennas shall be installed on roofs or exterior walls without prior written approval. Notice the words roof and walls. Nothing about freestanding masts in exclusive use yards. And nothing about federal law. I added, tapping the odor printout. They act like their booklet is the Constitution. She nodded, which works fine, until it runs into actual law. So we build a file that shows, 1, your device is protected. 2, they were told that. And 3, they kept pushing anyway. That's the part regulators care about. So we built it. Every document went into the yellow HOA, Carol folder in chronological order, with a sticky note on the edge, Gnomes, initial behavioral concern. First dish notice. Group email. Fine escalation. My neighbor's text about the Oak Ridge lien, printed with his permission and clipped behind a note. Pattern of aggressive enforcement. July drafted our official response on her laptop, while I paced and read regulations out loud like a field manual. She made me slow down at the parts where I wanted to slip in a jab. Delete obviously baseless, she said, highlighting a phrase I'd added. You're not here to win an argument. You're here to sound reasonable while they sound reckless. By the time we were done, the letter was sharp enough to shave with. We acknowledged their notice, described the dish with precise measurements, cited the specific ordered section, and stated calmly that their fines and removal demand constitute an unlawful restriction on a protected over-the-air reception device. We requested, not demanded, that they rescind all related violations within 10 days and confirm in writing that no further enforcement action will be taken regarding compliant reception devices on our property. At the bottom, beneath my name, July added a line. CC, Federal Communications Commission, Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, State Attorney General Consumer Protection Division. I looked at it and felt that same little thrill I usually get when a bridge design checked out down to the last bolt. Once this goes out, she said, every move they make either digs them deeper or gives them a way out, and we'll document both. We printed 2 copies, signed them both, and the next morning I drove my immaculate 95 Silverado to the post office, letter riding shotgun in a stiff manila envelope. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. Walking back to the truck, I saw Carol's golf cart buzz past the far end of the lot. She didn't see me. I just smiled to myself. Let her think she was winning the rumor war. I was playing a different game. Back home, I added the postal receipt to the folder and made one more note in the spiral. Response mailed, day 5. Clock now runs both ways. From that moment on, I stopped taking anything at face value. Every friendly reminder, every drive-by comment, every new notice got scanned, saved, numbered. My garage wall slowly filled with a neat grid of paper under pushpins, like a caseboard on one of those crime shows the grandkids like. Because at that point, all we were missing was one thing, a clean, undeniable example of Carol and the HOA pushing past the line after being told exactly where the law stood. And I had a feeling, given her need to perform for the neighborhood, that if I was patient and quiet, she'd hand me that final piece herself. All I had to do was set the bait just right and wait for her to step right into it. By the way, if you're the kind of person who keeps every letter and email just in case, go ahead and hit subscribe, because from here on out, those boring little papers are about to become the most powerful weapons in this story. The green card from the post office came back 3 days later. Delivery confirmed. July said, tapping the stamp box. They can't say they didn't know anymore. That was my cue. Up to then, I'd done exactly what their letters told me. Read, respond, wait. Now it was time for my favorite operation, malicious compliance. Follow the rules, so literally the only person who gets hurt is the one who wrote them. First move. I went in the backyard with a wrench and a coffee and loosened the clamps on the little gray dish. Tyler watched from the porch, brow furrowed. Are they making you take it down, Pops? Not exactly, I said. They said it couldn't be visible from common areas. So we're going to make sure it's visible from the one place they really hate. He blinked. The HOA office? Close enough. I unbolted the dish and set it on the patio table. Then I walked to the far corner of the yard by the back fence, stood still, and did the kind of quiet math engineers do with their eyes closed. July slid the door open. You meditating or planning? Both, I said. Where's the most legally protected dirt I own? She smiled. Anywhere fully inside our lot line, not share with anyone else. Good, I said, because their guidelines only mention roofs and walls, not freestanding anything. And ODRD doesn't care if a protected device is 2 feet off the ground or 30, as long as it's safe and on our property. Her smile widened. You're thinking mass. I'm thinking tower. I corrected. A very tall, very compliant, very documented tower. That night my garage became an engineering bay again. I sketched a telescoping mast, anchoring concrete, guide correctly, under city height limits. At the top, not just a dish, but a clean combo, TV antenna, weather station, and an odor-compliant receiver. July leaned over my shoulder. Want to add a lighthouse beacon? Tempting, I said, but we stay inside every rule. City Code, HOA Covenants FCC. If they come for this, they're not just wrong, they're exposed. Next day, I called a licensed installer, Mr. Davis, blue-collar guy who knew codes better than most inspectors. Need a telescoping mast. I told him. 30 feet. Permitted. Inside 12 inches of the spot. I texted him a backyard photo with a red X. He whistled, calling Mars. Just cartoons and weather, I said. And I want it so clean no one with a badge or a clipboard can complain. My favorite kind of job, he laughed. I'll pull the permits. While he handled the city, I handled the paper. Product specs, odor highlights, permit application, email confirmations. Everything printed, labeled, filed. From the street, the dish disappeared for a week. Carol's cart slowed past my house like she could smell a secret. I could practically hear her thinking. Maybe finally listen. She had no idea a perfectly legal surprise was curing in concrete. When Mr. Davis arrived, his work truck backed into my driveway. Ladder rack, cable reels company logo. The kind of truck that makes a certain HOA type twitch. Carol twitched. Her card appeared before he'd even set his outriggers. Phone already up. What's going on here, Mr. Miller? We haven't approved any new exterior modifications. I kept my voice polite. This is Mr. Davis. He's installing a federally protected reception device on a permitted mass entirely within my lot. He has copies of the permit and specs if you'd like to review them. From the sidewalk, Mr. Davis held up the city permit without stepping onto my grass. Sign and approve, ma'am. Under the height limit. Setbacks erect. Carol sputtered. You can't put a tower back there. That's industrial. It'll destroy sight lines. Your own guidelines restrict roofs and exterior walls. I said, this is a freestanding mass in my exclusive use area. And as our letter explained, TV reception devices are protected under federal law. I'm simply complying in a way that removes ambiguity. July appeared on the porch, smiling like it was a barbecue. We just wanted everything permitted and safe, she added. We care about the community. Carol snapped her phone up. I'll be documenting this for the board. This is an eyesore. Please do, I said, and note the permit number and that it's a protected over-the-air reception device. I'd hate anyone to be confused later about what they were objecting to. She glared, but she didn't step onto my lawn. The installer worked while I documented every stage, hole, footing, anchor bolts, guy wires, each photo date stamped with notes. By late afternoon, the mast stood tall enough to show from the sidewalk, a neat silhouette against the sky. On top sat the new combo, slim TV antenna, weather cup spinning, and our now larger dish catching signal like a dream. To me, it looked like freedom on a pole. To Carol, it looked like defeat with guy wires. She rounded the corner, phone recording in outraged silence. I stood in my driveway, hands in my pockets. Per your concern about visibility, I said evenly, I've ensured full compliance with your written guidelines and the FCC. Any future interference will be treated as a violation of federal regulation. I trust the board will want that on record. Her cheeks flushed. You can't build a tower every time you don't like a rule. I said. I read the rule. Then I followed it, very carefully. She drove off without another word, nearly taking out my mailbox. From that day on, anyone entering our cul-de-sac saw it. The flag on my front pole, and behind the oak, the gleaming, perfectly legal tower of compliance. Neighbors slowed. A few smiled. One even gave me a thumbs up when Carol wasn't looking. The bait was set. A high-profile, fully documented installation that hit every nerve she had. Visibility, control, and the fact she'd already been told it was untouchable. All I had to do now was wait for her to overreact in writing. When the email about an emergency HOA meeting hit my inbox a few days later, subject line in all caps, I knew they'd taken the hook, the line, and most of the reel. The emergency HOA meeting, community aesthetics and safety, was set for Thursday night at the clubhouse. All caps, 3 exclamation points. Carol's fingerprints all over it. July laid out my clothes like I was headed to a promotion board, not a folding chair circus. Clean jeans tucked in button-down, my old USMC ball cap. You're not going to war, she said, smoothing my shirt. You're going to let the paperwork do the fighting. On the kitchen table sat my reinforcements. The thick yellow HOA, Carol folder, a slim binder July tab, covenants, odor, permits, correspondence, and a 1-page summary in big, readable font. The parking lot was packed. My '95 Silverado looked out of place among leased SUVs. Inside, the clubhouse smelled like coffee and anxiety. Metal chairs in rows, a long board table up front. Carol at the center in a bright blazer with her crooked name tag. Paper stacked like she was about to perform surgery. At the far end sat a bald man in a gray suit I didn't recognize. Briefcase, not a clipboard. Interesting. Tom, the HOA president, Nice guy with a weak spine. Tapped the mic. Tonight's emergency session is to address a serious violation impacting community aesthetics and potential safety issues. His eyes landed on my hat. Mr. Miller, thanks for coming. I nodded and sat second row with July. She held the binder on her lap like a hymn book. Carol grabbed the mic, voice too bright. We've had an ongoing situation with a resident who refuses to comply with clearly stated rules regarding unauthorized satellite equipment. She hit a button, and the TV lit up a photo of my tower, framed like a threat, my flagpole peeking in the corner like a punchline. A murmur rolled through the room. Despite repeated notices and fines, she said, this resident escalated by installing a 30-foot metal tower without approval, creating an eyesore and possible health hazards for nearby children. She lingered on children like it was a weapon. My jaw didn't move. July's hand tightened once on my knee. Tom cleared his throat. We're here to decide on further enforcement actions, up to and including legal. Point of order, I said, calm but loud enough to carry. Before you talk about legal, you might want to review what's already on the record. Carol snapped. You'll speak during the homeowner comment period. The gray suit man leaned toward her and murmured something. Carol froze. Tom looked relieved. Actually, let's hear from Mr. Miller now. I stood and walked to the podium with the yellow folder. My knees reminded me I was 68, but my back stayed straight. I opened the folder slowly and looked at the board, not at Carol. My name is Bill Miller, I said. I'm the guy with the eyesore in the backyard. I'm also the guy you've been sending these to. I held up the violation, the fine letter, the emergency notice, all which I've read. Carefully. A few quiet chuckles. I'll keep it simple. First, your own covenants. I flipped to the tab and read the key line about roofs and exterior walls. My equipment is not on a roof or wall. It's on a freestanding, permitted mass within my lot. Then I flipped again. Second, federal law. I held up the ordered printout. The FCC's over-the-air reception devices rule. My wife and I cited this in a certified letter you received and signed for on June 23rd. The return receipt is stapled to the copy. I slid the letter forward. The bald man took it before Tom could and started reading, brow tightening it ordered. In that letter, I said, we explain the dish and antenna are protected devices under 1 meter for reception, installed in an area under my exclusive control. We asked that the violations and fines be rescinded. Instead, I continued. The board doubled down. More fines, threats of a lien, public emails about health hazards, drive-bys with a camera, comments about my grandkids within earshot of those same kids. Heads turned. Carol shifted. From the back, Mark called out, he's not the only one they scare with lean talk. I nodded once. I spent 32 years in uniform. I know the difference between a rule and a power trip. So when you told me my legal dish was unauthorized, I did exactly what your notice demanded. I gestured to the TV photo. I complied completely, moved equipment off any roof or wall, hired a licensed installer, pulled a city permit, stayed under height limits, documented everything. I held up the permit, invoice, and time-stamp photos. The lawyer raised a hand slightly. Tom leaned into the mic, voice thin. For the record, our counsel has confirmed odor does apply here. You could feel the air shift. Neighbors leaned forward. Carol's face went lighter. So here's where we stand, I said. Federal rules say you can't impair my right to install and use that device. Your own covenant language doesn't ban a freestanding mass in my yard. And you have a paper trail. I tapped the yellow folder, showing that after being told this, certain people kept pushing fines, threats, and public commentary anyway. I looked out at the room. I didn't move here to fight my HOA. I moved here to barbecue and watch cartoons with my grandkids. But when someone waves the word lean at my home and uses my family as props, I'm not rolling over. I'm reading the rules and following them better than they do. Silence. The good kind. I turned back to the board. One question, are we done here? Tom glanced at the lawyer. Tiny nod, then swallowed. Given the information presented and counsel's advice, I move that we rescind all violations and fines related to Mr. Miller's reception equipment, acknowledge his installation is compliant, and close this matter. I second. Another board member blurted. All in favor? Tom asked. Every hand went up. Opposed. Only Carol's hand twitched halfway, then dropped when she realized she was alone. The motion carries, Tom said, exhaling. Mr. Miller, will issue written confirmation your account is clear. Relief rolled through the room. Quiet laughs, a couple claps. Mrs. Jenkins even gave me a real smile. Carol lunged to Mike. This sets a dangerous precedent. Next thing you know, we'll have RVs, chickens. Ms. Collins, the lawyer cut in firm now. Broader policy can be discussed at a properly noticed meeting. Tonight, I advise limiting comments about federally protected devices or past enforcement actions. Translation: stop talking before you hand this man a lawsuit. Carol shut her mouth and stared daggers at the table. I gathered my papers and slid the yellow folder under my arm. I appreciate the board correcting the record, I said, and I hope the next time someone gets a notice with lien on it, it's because they actually broke a rule, not because they annoyed the wrong golf cart. That earned a few honest laughs. I sat beside July. She squeezed my hand. You did good, she whispered. I just read what they should have read. I murmured, but humiliating Carol, without raising my voice or breaking a single rule, was only the first half of the fallout. The real pain for the HOA was still coming, headed straight for their power and their bank account. If you ever want to tell an HOA exactly where they can stick a bogus fine, tell me in the comments what you would have said at that microphone, because what happened after that meeting hit them where it hurt most. You'd think that meeting would have been the end of it. For most people, having the fines wiped and the tower declared legal would be enough. Take the win, crack a beer, move on. That was my first instinct. But July doesn't just arrange flowers. She arranges loose ends. The morning after, she slid a coffee across the table and set a fresh envelope beside it. Our return address, HOA's address, certified sticker already on. What's this? I asked. Phase 2, she said. Paperwork doesn't just win battles. It makes sure they can't rewrite history. Inside was a clean 2-page letter. Page 1 thanked the board, polite, almost sweet, for rescinding the fines and confirming compliance. Page 2 was a blade, a timeline point by point. Gnome letter, first violation. Smear emails, lien threats, our ordered notice, dates, certified numbers, quotes from their own documents. At the bottom, in that lawyer tone you can smell through paper, it said the association should review enforcement to ensure future compliance with state and federal law, so no other homeowner gets pressure like this. We mailed it that day. Certified, of course. A week later, Tom knocked on my door himself. No golf cart, no entourage, just a man who looked like he'd been sleeping in his chair. Bill, he said, twisting his cap, we got your follow-up. The board met in executive session. Did you finally read what you've been signing? I asked. He gave a tired half-smile. Our counsel was very clear. We shouldn't have let it get that far. The fines, the emails, the lien talk, that's on us. He told me they were putting a moratorium on enforcement actions tied to reception equipment until new guidelines were drafted with legal review. No more health hazard language. And any lien threat now had to be approved by the full board and their attorney. That mattered more than any refund ever did. Good, I said. People sign up for an HOA, not a firing squad. He cleared his throat. One more thing. Carol resigned as compliance chair yesterday. Said it was stress and a hostile environment. He couldn't quite meet my eyes on that part. I didn't smile, but my shoulders loosened. Plenty of places need someone to yell at dishes. I said. Tom exhaled a laugh. We're also requiring training for compliance volunteers on the actual covenants and basic federal preemption. He said those words like they were new boots. July stepped up beside me, towel in hand. Tom, we appreciate you taking it seriously, she said. This isn't about embarrassing anyone. It's about making sure the next family doesn't get steamrolled over a kid's cartoon channel. Tom nodded, grateful. After that meeting, 3 neighbors came to me with their own stories. Fines they didn't understand. Threats they were too scared to fight. We can't run a community on fear of orange stickers. Over the next month, you could feel the shift. Group emails got boring again. Pool hours, trash pickup. When they mentioned rules, they quoted clause numbers and attached the page. No more vague certain residents, like it was a witch hunt. One Saturday, a young couple with a new baby knocked on my door. The husband held a crumpled notice about a non-compliant vehicle. They say my work van can't be in the driveway overnight, he said, but it's in the garage by 8 every morning. Is that allowed? We sat them at the kitchen table, opened the binder, and read the actual line. No commercial vehicles may be routinely stored outdoors overnight. Then we helped them write one calm paragraph asking how routine applied to a rotating night shift. 2 weeks later, they got an apology email, and the notice was withdrawn. Word spread. People stopped me at the mailbox with shaky letters and left with sticky notes, bullet point states, and one rule: respond once in writing and keep a copy. I didn't charge a dime. I just repeated what July told me. Read what it says, not what someone yells it says. Meanwhile, my giant legal tower became a landmark. Kids gave directions by it. Turn at Pop's Tower. On stormy days, neighbors texted my weather station. When the wind knocked out cable for half the block, my reception barely flickered. Tyler watched a rocket launch live while his friend's house spun a loading icon. Even the board acted different. They held an open workshop. No votes, just Q&A. The gray suit lawyer explained odored in plain English. Tom looked me in the eye and said, "We're going to do better." I believed him, because for once they were more afraid of the law than of losing face. The HOA's finances took a quiet hit, too. Without junk fines and administrative fees, their slush fund shrank. They postponed a decorative sign upgrade and spent money where it belonged, repairing the pool gate and fixing a busted streetlight. But the real payoff wasn't dollars. It was people walking dogs without flinching when a golf cart rolled by. July tending her flowers without a phone pointed at her. My grandkids sprinting across the yard, pointing at the mast and telling friends, "That's Pop's TV rocket. The rules say it's okay." From my porch, under the flag I still raise at sunrise and take down at dusk, I watch the neighborhood remember something basic. Rules are supposed to protect people, not crush them. And every night, when the cartoons came on and the grandkids piled onto the couch, that dish pulled in signal like a champ. A quiet reminder that sometimes the best revenge is a perfectly legal eyesore. If watching an HOA back down from its own overreach gives you even a little satisfaction, hit the like button. Because there was still one thing about this whole mess that kept nagging at me, and it's the reason I didn't just close that yellow folder and forget the HOA ever existed. That nagging feeling I mentioned, it wasn't about the tower, the money, or even Carol. It was about the folder. That yellow HOA Carol file sat on the top shelf of my garage, like a loaded tool I hadn't put away. Every time I reached for a wrench, I felt its weight. Not guilt, responsibility. I kept thinking about the young couple with the work van, about the guy on Oak Ridge Mark texted me about, the one who sold his house after lien threats, about every white envelope that makes someone's stomach drop because they think an HOA can take their home over a flower pot. One Saturday, I was polishing the chrome on my '95 Silverado when Mark wandered up with 2 iced teas. He scanned my pegboard, the labeled drawers, the tower peeking over the oak. "You really changed things," he said. "Place feels lighter." I shrugged. All I did was read what they should have read and mail what they hoped I wouldn't. He laughed, then sobered. "Carol's telling anyone who'll listen you, lawyered up and bullied her out." "Carol can tell whatever story helps her sleep," I said. "The paper tells mine." That night, July, and I pulled the folder down and went through it again at the kitchen table. She added a clean cover sheet. HOA enforcement, Miller property, closed, then listed the outcome in her tidy handwriting. Fines rescinded, device compliant, procedures under review, compliance chair resigned. Then she slid into a larger binder labeled HOA precedent. "Why the new name?" I asked. "Because this isn't just about Carol," she said. "This is a template. If they try this with someone else, you can hand them a roadmap, dates, rules, tone. how to answer without losing your mind or your house. And that's what had been bothering me. Winning my own fight and walking away would have felt wrong. I don't wear a uniform anymore, but my brain never really took off the rank. So I made a quiet decision. I cleared a shelf in the garage between the torque wrenches and my old field manuals and put the HOA precedent binder there, spine out. Next to it, I stacked fresh yellow folders and a pack of sticky notes. July watched from the doorway with that half smile. "You opening a new branch of government in here?" Something like that. I said, "Unofficial department of, no, you can't do that." It didn't take long. A few weeks later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to a woman I barely knew, clutching a crumpled white envelope. "Mr. Miller?" "I'm Emily," she said, voice shaky. "They say my front yard flower bed is non-compliant, and if I don't rip it out, they'll start fines and maybe a lien. I don't even know where to start." July appeared at my shoulder like she'd been expecting it. "Come on in, Emily. Let's look at it at the table." We sat her down, poured iced tea, smoothed the notice under the kitchen light. While July pulled up the covenant section they cited, I went to the garage, grabbed a fresh yellow folder, and wrote on the tab, "HOA, Emily." Under it, without thinking, I added, "You are not alone." I slid it toward her and opened it beside the HOA precedent binder. "Here's the thing," I told her. "They're counting on you being scared and alone. You're not. These are just rules written by people. Some matter. Some don't stand up to real law. We read them, we answer once, in writing, and we keep copies. That's it." She glanced toward the back window where the tower was visible and finally let out a breath. "If you could beat them over a giant metal thing in your yard," she said, half laughing, "maybe I can keep a few petunias." "Petunias are a hill I'm willing to die on," I said. Inside, my grandkids argued over which rocket documentary to watch. Outside, the tower hummed in the evening breeze, pulling in signal like always. The flag snapped once and settled. Life went back to normal, just not the old normal where people flinch at golf carts and whisper like the walls had ears. A new normal, where the HOA's power stayed where it belonged, on paper with limits. Neighbors waved again. Kids rode in loose packs. July's flowers spilled a little farther over the edges, and no one measured them with a ruler. Carol's house went up for sale a few months later. The listing bragged about a quiet, well-managed community. I hoped wherever she landed, someone handed her a copy of Odor before she found another clipboard. As for me, I still raise a flag every morning. I still wash the Silverado on Sundays. I still date stamp the boring stuff. And every so often, when a white envelope lands in a neighbor's mailbox and panic shows up on their face, they knock on my door and ask, "Pops, do you have a minute?" I always do, because in that little corner of Houston, we prove something simple. You don't need to scream to stand your ground. Sometimes all it takes is a quiet man, a sharp woman, a garage full of folders, and a tower that reminds everyone where the real limits are. In that neighborhood, the war with the HOA was over. But anyone who knows the system knows there's always another committee president somewhere who thinks they're above the law. Subscribe to the channel and click the video on your screen to watch the next absurd HOA story.